So next we have the lighting department, and that's the gaffers, the best boy, the lighting technicians, and then they are partnered with the electricians or the electrical department, and oftentimes grips are kind of thrown in there with them. The lighting department, the gaffer is the person in charge of the whole lighting of the film. So they work with the director of photography's vision to implement his or her lighting vision for the film and then make sure it's set up. And in their crew they have the best boy for lighting, which is basically their right-hand person to help them set up all the lighting and make sure that the rest of the crew is doing their job. And then lighting technicians, they set up the lights. Electricians work not with the lights directly, but they work with the making sure that, for instance, the location that you're at has the right amount of ampage or wattage. I don't even know what the right term is there, for a house to manage the type of draw that the electrical power will have. They make sure that the generators are on set to make sure that the lighting is properly powered. Then you have grips, and they are there to help with the rigging of the lighting. So there are these things called C-stands. There are these silver poles with 3 legs on the bottom that fold flat, and then you can set them up on set, and they put sandbags on them to make sure that they don't topple over. And on those C-stands you can hang lights, you can hang flags and scrims to dim or block the light so that you can light in a very specific manner. And the grips are the people who manage that. The key grip is the chief grip. They manage, they're the head of all of that, and they work very closely with the director of photography. They also have a best boy who's their assistant. And then there's also a dolly grip who would be in charge of any of the equipment that manages motion of a camera, like a dolly on tracks or a crane or a jib. And then there are grips that are there simply to lift all the heavy objects, because there's a lot of heavy stuff on a film set. Other departments under the line, the art department, they manage the production design, so the look of the set, the look of the background. The art director is very much in charge of that, and they work very closely with both the director of photography and the set designer to make sure that the director's vision is being implemented. They have all sorts of assistants. They use all sorts of artists to create that, illustrators and graphic artists. There are set decorators who are on set the day of the shoot to make sure that the set has all of the little fluffy pillows that they need in the scene, or flowers, or whatever is needed for that particular scene. The set decorator is the person there who's placing that on set. They have people who do the buying for that. They have people who are the actual set dressers, so it's the set decorators in charge of dressing the set, and the set dressers are the people who actually do the work of putting the flowers on the set. And I use flowers as a general term. It's all sorts of things. Whatever it takes to make a set look like it's supposed to look. So if it's a morgue, there's going to be a person there who makes sure that there's like all of the things that you need in a morgue. I don't know what would be there, but that's what comes to mind. What else? There are carpenters on a set to construct the set. Excuse me. And there's levels of carpentry too. There's props carpentry, there's set carpentry. Props are the things that you can manage and hold in your hand. A set is more like a room or an area where activity is contained. There's prop masters, who are the people in charge of the props. Anything that an actor picks up and uses is a prop. So if there's a severed head and they pick it up, that's a prop. I am very morbid today, and I am so sorry. There's people who are specifically in charge of weapons on the set. If there's a gun being used or a bow and arrow. So for instance, in Jennifer Lawrence's films The Hunger Games, she does a lot of archery, so there's a lot of weapons being used there, and there's a person on set specifically in charge of those weapons. They don't just put them down at the end of shooting a scene. That weapons master makes sure that that weapon is safely secured so that nobody can get injured by it, and it's only being handled by the weapons master and the actor who's supposed to use it. There's the costume designer and the costume supervisor and all sorts of layers of costumers, and I'm sure you can imagine that having A large cast means that there's a lot of different clothing that has to be worn. And depending on the era that it takes place in, it's going to have a very specific look. So imagine the costumes in Mad Max Fury Road versus the costumes in The Hunger Game versus the costumes in a period piece like Schindler's List. All of that takes a huge team of people to make sure that everybody's dressed appropriately. Then, of course, there's the hair and makeup team, and they manage all of the look of the actors to make sure that they're not too shiny on camera, that they're wearing the right kind of makeup. Here's a little interesting tidbit. HD cameras need special makeup. You're going to start noticing more and more people who don't use HD makeup and getting captured by the paparazzi or on film by a filmmaker who doesn't know what they're doing. That makeup that's non-HD shows up as very shiny, strange looks on their face, or like blotches of powder. But if you have HD-friendly makeup, then it looks like a smooth application of makeup. So start watching for that. See if you can't find some examples of that. So hair and makeup. And then, of course, there's special effects. We all love our special effects, and there's plenty of people, technicians and others who work on the special effects. Sometimes special effects are managed on set, and sometimes they're managed in post-production. So if there's an explosion, sometimes a portion of that explosion happens on set, and then in post-production there's another team that comes in and magnifies that explosion and makes it look more visually impactful. Stunt coordinators and stunt artists do all of the hard work that the actors are not physically trained to do. So if you have to jump out of a moving vehicle, there's a stunt person to do that for you. So, and there's strict rules around ensuring actors. So if an actor insists on doing their own stunts, they become more difficult to insure, and so it becomes more difficult to hire them and keep the film under budget because insurance is so expensive. And of course, sound production. There's a boom operator on set and a sound recordist, a person who is managing the recording of all the sound that's happening on set live. Oftentimes, the sound that you hear in a film, especially the dialogue, is done in ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement. And ADR, basically, they film everything, they capture the sound, but the sound just isn't the best and easiest to understand, so they bring the actors back into a recording studio, run the video footage of the scene, and have the actors say the lines so that it matches the motion of their mouth. And that's actually that happens a lot. You can start to listen for it in films, and you're going to start hearing it more and more as you become more aware of film production and how things are made. For me, being involved in film for as long as I have been, it's hard for me to sit in many lower quality productions because I hear the ADR all the time and it bothers me, but that's just me. So then there's the editor, of course. The editor is in charge of piecing everything together. Depending on how it was shot, they might have a cutter who's cutting the negatives, but oftentimes things are shot digitally these days, so that's not necessary. There's colorists and there's people that do visual effects in post-production in the editing room. There's compositors and rotoscopers who paint things into a set, into a frame of footage. And then there's, of course, sound and music, which is a huge part of film production. There's a sound editor and a dialogue editor and a re-recording mixer and a music director or supervisor and Foley artists who create the sound effects that we hear. So if somebody's walking across gravel, they're not just recording that on set. They have somebody in a studio literally walk across gravel, and that's the only sound that's recorded, and that's blended in at a low level underneath the dialogue that's happening so that it sounds like somebody's walking across dialogue, or walking across gravel, but at a level that isn't overwhelming. Because oftentimes, if we were to record somebody walking over gravel, the sound of their foot on the gravel and the sound of their voice would blend into the same channel, and it would become difficult to hear their voice. So that's when ADR comes into place. They take the sound of the voice and the sound of the gravel separately, and they blend them so that the sound of stepping across gravel is much lower than the sound of the voice, and it becomes easier to hear the voice. So that's basically it. There's a lot of other positions on set, but those are the ones that really have a large impact on the production of a film. And we're going to go into next talking about the difference between producing our own work and a high quality production, and what it takes to put that into place. So I want you to start thinking about, when you're watching the videos that I'm going to show you, what does it take to make something work? And coming up, you're going to have some fun little short videos to look at, and then we're going to talk about what it took to make those.